it's great to see so many people here. I've been at Christian Aid for a long time, and every year it seems that Black History Month gets better and better, bigger and bigger, and more participatory. I've been given the very daunting task of depressing everybody, for which I'm not grateful. But essentially, I'm here to remind everybody that even though we're celebrating, and we have so much to celebrate, we've fought historically as people from the North and the South, as a collective, for the end of slavery, for the end of the slave trade, for the end of colonization, for the civil rights movement, for women's suffrage, for women's equality, for the right to vote, for so many things. We have so much to celebrate, and I think that is a very important thing to do. But I think we need to remind ourselves, we need to remember that the struggle is not over. Far from it. Not for any of us. Our struggle for gender and racial equality is not over, and our struggle for gender equality is far from over. So we need to pause and reflect about what remains to be done. And perhaps I can start a little bit with a personal reflection. Paul mentioned that I am from Trinidad and Tobago, that's where I grew up. And for 3 years, I was a volunteer at the local rape crisis center. I worked on the hotline, I accompanied women who were raped. I spoke at schools, I spoke to students, to teachers, to boys and girls, and I accompanied women to courts. And therefore, I feel that these are things that I personally have never forgotten. You cannot forget the experience of a woman who has experienced rape and who has to see her assailant walk in front of her very freely. You can never forget these experiences. You cannot forget a young girl who has been raped by a teacher and who brings the case to you at school, and the principal brushes it off because it's a friend of his. And you cannot forget that when you try to address the parent suggests that it was probably her own fault. These are things that have never gone away from me. And I probably need to thank the 14-year-old boy at Trinidad and Tobago El Dorado Secondary School. I was asked to deliver a talk on sexual negotiation just before the carnival period. Trinidad has a very big carnival. And I spoke to the girls first, and the girls were conscious about sexual negotiation and worried and demure and engaged with me. And then I went to meet the boys. And the boys were raucous and wild. And I had a lot of difficulty just talking to them, just trying to meet with them on a person-to-person level. And one young man said to me something that I will never forget, and which actually probably changed my life. He said, "Miss, every woman must get raped sometime in her life." I have never forgotten that. Because I realized that whatever I was saying to girls and whatever we as an institution were saying to girls, there was no equivalent organization doing the same thing with boys and with young men. Nobody was doing it. I was very concerned about that, and up to today I remain concerned about that. And this is probably one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about gender-based violence taking place in Haiti today, because as the world focuses on cholera, and rightly so, and homelessness and shelter, there are other issues that are not yet been given the attention that they deserve. And one of them, sadly, is the increasing and alarming incidence of women and young girls being raped repeatedly by their own men. The struggle is not over, folks. The struggle is something we need to look at. What are we teaching our men? What are we teaching our women? What are we particularly teaching our men? And why is it that men feel that the only way they can assert their masculinity is through violence? Let us not believe for a moment that only women are victims of this, because recently Rocco and Thomas and I looked at a film about gender-based violence against men in Uganda in a conflict situation, in a war situation. So this is about power and how power is manifested in the relationships between people. Sadly, it is the case that women are more the victims than men, but it is an issue about power and negotiation. And I ask myself, looking at the situation in Haiti today, if a crisis brings out the best in people, which it has in Haiti, it also brings out the worst in them. And we need to understand more about how we can help people to transform from the worst of themselves to the best of themselves. And I ask myself as well, what have we been doing in our gender work? Why is it that 20, 30 years later, 20, 30 years after doing so much gender work in so many countries, we have a wave of gender-based violence across the world? And I'm thankful to Nigel Timmins, I don't know if he's here, but Nigel and I had a heated argument yesterday. And he reminded me that it's not just in Haiti, and it's actually right here in London. There is, you know, those of us who take the tube and go to cinema can see that there are advertisements focused on women who take unlicensed minicabs. So it is not just in Haiti, it is not just in Uganda, it's everywhere. It affects all of us. And I want to remind all of you, because I will never forget, that these gender-based violence affects your self-esteem, your confidence, your self-worth. I've, in the last few days, been reading about women in Haiti who will not commit suicide only because their children are dependent on them. This affects people for life. So we need to think about it. We need to think about it. Having said all of that, I feel very strongly, and I'm taken back to that 14-year-old in the school, that I don't want to believe in a narrative that says that all men are aggressors naturally, and that all women are victims. I want to believe in a different story. I want to believe that a different story can be told. What are the truths? What other narratives can we have between men and women? It is impossible. Yes, there will always be in society people who take advantage of the powerless. But I find it hard I cannot accept that men are essentially violent, which is what a lot of us have been taught. I think we need to look at a different narrative. I think we need to look at how we socialize people, how we socialize our men, particularly to look at their sexuality, their power, their relationships with women, their relationships with themselves, how they define themselves. And I think we need to continue speaking about these things at Christian Aid. We've started, but we need to start looking at it again. And until we do that, until we believe in this narrative of a truly equal gender relationship, which is not just about women, it's about women and men, boys and girls. Until we do that, we will have no other choice but to look at protective, corrective measures, such as we're suggesting in Haiti now, of lighting, security, indictments for people who have committed rape. Those are the corrective measures, and they're important, and they must be put in place, and we must fight for them. But there is another bigger story about how we raise our people and the discussions we're having as men and women and boys and girls. Let's not forget that. Thank you.